Hello, and welcome to the first Megaquest podcast. First of many, I hope. Megaquest being mega questions. So, who are we? Where do we come from? What do we believe in? What is life? So, human beings, as we know them, like to ask questions, but are we always ready to listen to the answers? Maybe there aren't any answers that we have discovered so far to some of the big questions, but we can certainly pose more. We can develop theories and hypotheses based on what we know, what we can see, and a little of what is deep in our imaginations. All you need is an open mind, a willingness to challenge mainstream thinking and what we have always been taught. Unfortunately, many people, especially some academics, will not be able to do this, or in other words, prove themselves wrong, or possibly wrong. They have formed their hypotheses using facts over many, many years. This is not just so for academics amongst us. Many have gleaned their ideas and beliefs from the society, culture, or family in which they live and have grown up in, and find it almost impossible to open themselves up to an alternative possibility. Call it indoctrination if you want, although I'm trying not to condemn, blame, or poo poo anything here, but just to contest the centuries, millennia maybe, old paradigm. Now, I don't take anything at face value. I always ask why. This has got me into a whole heap of trouble throughout my life. But still, I ask. Still, I question and ponder the answer provided to me. So, this podcast, it was going to be a book. I decided on a podcast, is based on my opinion with the support of facts and observations, and of course, other people's research too, in an attempt to answer my questions. Although every time I find new and interesting research, I end up down another deep rabbit hole. More often than not, this journey, rather than answering my questions, it poses a whole kaleidoscope of new ones. So we all have questions, right? I want us to find out these answers together. The whole idea of this podcast is a podcast for everybody to talk, to discuss, to bash out their ideas. I want us to answer these questions together. That's the main idea, anyway. History teaches us that there's always been organized human progression throughout time, from primordial swamp life that dragged itself onto the land. But where do we come from? Did we come from that primordial swamp life? There's still some of that left here. Did we come from Adam and Eve? Were we a progression of evolution? Or did indeed we come from the stars? What do you think? Now, this leads us on to who is God? Because God has always been, in our historic lifetime, almost that person or that thing that controls people's lives. What is religion? Why do we have to believe? Why do billions of people believe all over the world in whatever God, Allah, whatever they believe in? There are so many religions. Why do we need to believe? Why do we have to have that? What about aliens? That's a big question. What do we want to call them? Greys, extraterrestrials, otherworldly beings? Were there flying machines? Are there flying machines? What are UFOs? What do people see? Why are flying machines mentioned in the Bible? There's our connection. Alien abduction. What happens? What happens to these people? What happens to these people that get taken into spaceships or onto stars or whatever happens to them? And why? Why do they take us? What do they want? Who really built the pyramids? Not just the pyramids, but many of the mega structures in the world. Stonehenge, Göbekli Tepe, there is a huge list. Why can't modern technology replicate ancient technology? Why can we not build those walls like this without a good deal of money? They look like kind of Lego walls, but all molded in together. The little tiny beautiful vases, why can't we do that? Are all these questions connected? Good possibility. There are so many rabbit holes we can explore. So let's do that together. I want us to do this together. I want this to be a community podcast for everybody. So I want you to put your questions or your suggestions, your theories, your thoughts, your answers in the chat box. Let's discuss this together. So every single week or every single podcast, I want to answer your questions, pose more questions, look at your suggestions, look at your theories, discuss those theories. I want us to be a community of questioners. Now, like, comment, share, subscribe, please. Because as you can see, I am sat on my sofa in my small apartment in the Canary Islands with no super duper studio or equipment. So maybe I could buy some new lights or a camera or a decent microphone. Or even maybe I could go and visit these places that we are talking about and do podcasts straight from there. That would be amazing. So please like, comment, share, subscribe. And I really hope to see you again soon. I really hope that you will find some questions that you have asked all of your life to be able to put those in the chat box to say, okay, maybe Megaquest can find the answers. Or maybe we can just have a really good discussion about what these are. Now, I want in the future to get some guests on. Now, I don't want guests, well, I do want guests like people like Graham Hancock, Randall Carson, Ben Van Kirkwick. These would be great people to have on. But I think I'm kind of shooting for the stars here. So let's start and have some of you guys on. And we will share information and well, just have normal people on. Normal people without massive degrees and years and decades of information and research. Let's just have us just chatting about our answers, our hypothesis on what things are. So this is number one of many, many podcasts. Like, subscribe, please add your questions in the chat box. And we will see you again soon. So for now, I will say goodbye and I will look for those questions. See you next time.